As a broadcaster with video production, sports information, storytelling, and game operations skill sets, Lee Athletic Communications Director Philip Tang has helped shape how fans see the Gulf South. He has been behind the mic, behind the camera, and behind the scenes for some of the biggest moments in both Lee and Gulf South athletics. Stay tuned as we go behind the scenes into Philip's time at a few different GSC schools and how he has been able to balance both a work and a personal life. This is Inside the GSC. Today on Inside the GSC, we're joined by Philip Tang from Lee University, the Athletic Communications Director, a true multi-talented professional whose work spans broadcasting, video production, streaming operations, sports informations, and traditional writing and statistics. Philip has served roles at Union University, Delta State, and Lee over the course of years, bringing a deep background in storytelling and game presentation to the Gulf South Conference. Philip, great to have you on, brother. We appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us here
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, thanks for asking me. It's a privilege.
For sure. We'll start with the big question here.
Okay.
What first drew you into the world of sports and specifically media communications and broadcasting?
I always loved sports from a young age. My mom told me my first word was ball, so I guess that kind of led into just a love of sports in general. I think in middle schools where it really kind of kicked in of, oh, I want to do something with a broadcast, because growing up, watching NBC or ABC and Keith Jackson or like Marv Albert calling a game, that kind of just drew me into, oh, this would be fun to describe and say what's happening with a game. Because growing up, I was never a very big kid, and so I knew probably playing collegiate athletics or even professional athletics was out of the question. And so this kind of was like, oh, you could do this and still be involved in athletics.
Absolutely. And it seems like with broadcasting, with most people that I've talked to, when it comes to how they started out specifically in broadcasting, it usually is something that's derived at a young age. And just looking up to some of the more professional play-by-play announcers, to your point, like who you've mentioned. And obviously, there's so many names out there that we can name. But as we transition from you growing up and then as you're looking for schools and trying to figure out where you wanted to go, you come across Union University. So what made you choose Union in particular?
Well, I grew up in Jackson, so I've known about Union my whole life. And the head of the broadcast department at Union was a family friend, Steve Beverly, who used to do a lot of stuff and still did for quite a while at Union. And I got to know him, and it made sense that, oh, this would be a good chance to stay at home and go to a really good Christian school with a good education and learn and dive into broadcasting. When I started at Union, I had no idea what path I was going to take. All I knew I wanted to work with sports broadcasting, so I didn't know what all led. When I was starting up, oh, this is the goal I have. It kind of was just what's available.
If there was an opportunity at that time, if you think back to 18-year-old Philip Tang, and let's say hypothetically you didn't have that connection at Union, would you have considered going out of state potentially when it came to a broadcast opportunity?
A little bit, I think so. But despite knowing, Steve Beverly on that side, just all the opportunities that Union provided, because when I was there, was an NAIA program, and they hosted the women's basketball Division I championship for many years, and I knew Union had a chance to work every single one of those games. So I knew from the get-go, sports was a high priority. So I would say, I considered it, but really, truly, Union was really where I wanted to go.
Your early work also included being a video technician at one of the TV stations, and
Mhm.
you gained a lot of good experience in addition to what you got at Union as an undergrad. What were those early experiences like for you, and how were you able to work out that balance while going to school?
It was good because I got to learn a lot of different things. I learned how to program a TV channel, essentially how their system worked. I learned how to set up cameras and fine tune cameras and run audio and do all the particular, which I think help in the long run working at Delta State and Lee, being able to do a little bit of everything. If something crazy would have come up, that kind of was like, oh, I've got this background. I can make a fix really quick. It may not be the most conventional way, but I, make it work. But the cable channel was really good about knowing I was a college student and would get me when I was not in class, or on a Friday night to help work a high school football game, or a special TV coverage of the local elections. So they were really good about working me in when my schedule allowed.
While you were also at Union, you had the opportunity to at least be around Stephen Aldridge, who has been at
Yes.
Union since the early 2000s, and now working alongside him in the GSC as the head person at Lee while he's still at Union. What's that experience been like, and if there's been any mentorship between you and him?
Oh yeah, it's been great. I love working along with Stephen Aldridge. Like as a student, it was great learning from him the traditional SID things. I never thought I was going to athletic communications, but looking back, I learned just small things, even just from hanging out in his office occasionally. But now it's great because I can bounce ideas off of him of like, hey, what do you think if I tried something like this? And then he'd do the same thing. He's like, what if I try something like this? And we both kind of bounce off one another and just you know make each other try and be the best that we possibly can. I mean, we text all the time about different things. We'll send each other different graphic ideas that we like, or crazy stats that we might see from a Major League Baseball game. We'll share those. So we're great friends that just try to make each other better in our jobs.
And this actually is a perfect segue into the next question that I had for you. It seems like in the world of athletic communications, there are so many different niches, or at least specialties for certain folks. Some are very strong in writing. Some, again, like you and I, are more the video broadcasting side of things. There's traditional statistics, and there's just individuals that have a gift for that. And with your broadcasting work, there's different avenues that you can go with from your early experiences working within TV reporting and getting those opportunities. What led to you deciding to ultimately stick around with athletic communications?
I think the idea of I want to broadcast, and even if it's not a full-time job, because those are really hard to come by, I at least, even if I'm working something else, I still can be a part of, even if it's just a softball game here or a volleyball game there and some basketball here and there. That's what I want to do. So that's one of the reasons I started at Delta State. Was I want to learn how to and do majority of my job would be sports information, athletic communications, whatever you want to call it. But I got to broadcast the basketball games, which is what I really wanted to do. And so that's the reason I chose athletic communications. Then the other reason is I like college athletics because I get the different sports. Because if you're working for a professional team, more often that's your only job, and if your team is having a bad year, it's tough. But if you're having a bad year in one of your fall sports, you just got to wait because in 2 months the winter sports start, or if your winter sports having a tough go, the spring sports start in February. So it's always something new to look forward to. And no one ever wants their team to do bad, but if something happens, their team is bad, you can look forward to another sport and not have to wait the whole calendar year for your basketball team to start all over.
Been there, done that. So, Philip, after you graduate Union, now we get into a thicker portion of your GSC experiences and kind of just diving a little bit more deeper into Delta. You've spent nearly a decade in Cleveland,
Yeah.
Mississippi, in the green and
Mm-hmm.
white. First question is, how did that come about, and how did you find yourself in your journey just making your way all the way towards West Mississippi?
Yeah, I never anticipated when I went to Delta State that I would spend 9 years there, but it was a great time. So I graduated from Union in 2012. I'm working a couple jobs in Jackson the next year when Union joins the GSC. I'm volunteering at Union, just learning the ropes to kind of get more under my resume. Well, Matt Jones from Delta State came for a basketball game, introduced himself to Steven, and then asked if anyone he knew of might be interested in being a GA somewhere. Well, myself and then Caroline George at the time, now Caroline Fletcher, who's at Delta State, both jumped at the opportunity to go be GAs at Delta State. Get your tuition paid for essentially and get a master's degree and then dive into what you want to do. And then it just took off from there. 2 years at a GA, and then they brought me on part-time at first and then full-time essentially at Delta State. And it was a fun journey with a lot of adventures, going to the World Series in baseball, football playoffs, basketball national championships, golf national championships, swim and dive national championships. So it was a blast at Delta State.
I think that's putting it mildly, Philip, just even following along
Yeah.
with the success that Delta's had, especially in that
Hmm.
2010s decade and what they've done. From the experiences that you've gotten from there and just some of the stuff you've learned, what would you say would be some of your biggest takeaways from your 9 years at Delta?
Learn how to manage, time well. Because when you first get going, you're like, all right, I can just work all the time and just, I'm not married, I'm not dating anybody. I just work, work, work and dive into it. Learn how to balance kind of like a home life, even if you're a single guy, like I was for most of it, and, you know, getting rest. Because it's easy to drag yourself into all the time, following every little thing, doing every little thing that's asked of you on the spot. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway is just time balance.
Delta also has had deep athletics. Like their traditions have been night and day, where
Mhm.
just about anything when it comes to certain traditions that they have, and they made sure they make it well known. What was it like being part of those game day operations at a place with so much history?
I mean, it was fun and challenging at the same time because you want to make sure you're keeping up what was done before, and there's a standard to hold up to, and you're making sure that everything you're doing holds up to that standard. Um, but it's fun covering a football game at Parker McCool is a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but there's nothing like that crowd, especially like on pig picking or in homecoming when everyone's just rocking and ready to go.
Now, Philip, while you were at Delta State as well in those 9 years, you also had an opportunity to be at your church. You found a church home, and I
Mhm.
believe you've also done some work with them. Talk to us a little bit about that experience and maybe even share some stories that you've had trying to manage from a church service standpoint. Obviously, with churches, some will ask you for a certain committed number of hours from a volunteer standpoint, but also realizing that they know you have arguably one of the busiest professions
Right.
in the country. So, how were you able to manage enough time to volunteer with your church while being able to take on a job for the Statesman?
Yeah, so I went to First Baptist Church in Cleveland, and I went there as a GA, and then afterwards, when I stuck around at Delta State, the pastor he was like, "Hey, we're looking for someone to help kind of just oversee media and help us take the next step forward." And he was like, "We know you're busy. We know Delta State will come first, but whatever you can do to help, take us in another, a new direction and move forward, do so." So that's what I did for, I guess, almost 7 years of the 9 years I was at Delta State. Just kind of help them, put in new equipment, get new cameras rolling, set up some broadcast standards that we needed to do, and push forward there. But it was tough because there'd be a lot of times it'd be a late night and then an early morning. One of the craziest stories I have, Delta State football played at Texas A&M Commerce. I think they're East Texas A&M now. It was a night game, so we're driving back through the night. I got a little sleep. Well, I needed to go. I'd forgotten to set up a couple things at church, so I walk off the bus at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning because we drove through the night. Went to the church real quick, set it up, and then went home and took a nap before soccer later that day. So that's probably the craziest thing I've ever done.
Wow.
Literally 8 a.m. I'm walking off the bus, somewhat like really comfortable bus, nothing fancy. Go to church real quick, set it all up, and then left and went to bed.
And obviously, in a church setting, there really isn't an option to tell your supervisor or tell whoever, hey, had a quote unquote emergency that came up. And so I'm not going to be able to do it. No, in those
Sure.
situations, you still got to handle and take care of business, and you still got to make sure that you're doing your due diligence and
Yeah.
service.
Well, luckily, I had people running everything, volunteers running everything. I just had to make sure it was set up and ready to go.
So, Philip, as we talk about Delta State for the
Hmm.
last 9 years, we get past COVID, and then around 2021, an opportunity opens up at Lee. Talk to us how
Hmm.
that all came out and just kind of the process and what was going through your mind at the time.
Yeah, so late 2021, early 2022, I knew I was ready to make a change at Delta State. Just it was time to find something new. So I can't remember which GSC championship I mentioned to George Starr, who is the voice of the Flames here at Lee, and has been here for 30 plus years. That I was starting to look around. Well, he told Carmen Lastoria when he got back, and Carmen had an opening coming open. So he called me and said, "Hey, you want to come work at Lee?" And I was like, "Sure. I love East Tennessee. I'm a Tennessee native, so I want to get back to Tennessee. That'd be great. I love the mountains. Cleveland's pretty close to the Smokies, so it made sense to come all the way from one Cleveland to another Cleveland."
With every school within athletic communications and sports informations, I don't think everything is exactly cookie cutter when it comes to the responsibilities and stuff that you have going on. So, at Lee in particular, in your role and what they were asking you to do, how would you describe the day to day responsibilities specifically when it comes to what you do for the Flames?
It's actually varied from when I first started. When I came on, I was doing a little bit of writing, just recaps and stuff, but I was also focused a lot more on graphics and photos and video. Well, that kind of shifted, and now I'm almost back to more of just traditional sports information. Jonathan Murray, our creative content coordinator, he came on. He was a student here, and we brought him on after he graduated. He has taken a little more of the social media side, the video photography side. Now I still help, create graphics, or when a final score happens, I'll make a graphic to put out. But he handles that, so I'm a little more of the day to day here. I need to nominate this player for GSC Player of the Week. I need to make sure this stat stuff that we've got is accurate and all that stuff. So I've gone from more communications to more sports information, which is kind of funny. But
To that point, outside of broadcasting and being able to call games, what would you say would be some of your favorite moments or even some of your favorite projects that you're currently working on right now?
ooh, we've started a new series that is actually not really much on me, but we're doing, it's called Beyond the Jersey. So it's student written features. We've just done one so far. We've got two or three, hopefully, to get out in December and early January. But it's just an idea we came up. The Players Tribune on the national scale is really popular. People want to hear what the athlete has to say, like, because we can write about what the athlete says, but it's nothing like hearing from the athlete themselves what they have to write about. So our first one was Grace Berry, a women's soccer player. She did a great job of telling everyone why she chose Lee and why that's important to her. So I think that's my favorite little series that we've just started, and hopefully I'm going to grow it as we move along.
The more exposure you can get for a certain school, the better, right? I mean, I know it sounds pretty obvious, when you say it like that, but it's just whatever creative ways you can try to find to promote your school, to promote your teams and programs, because in this business, we're doing nothing but trying to uplift our own student athletes and coaches, right? So the more creative we can make it, the better.
Right, right. Just and it's we're a smaller Division II school. We don't get near the coverage that any Power 4 school is going to get. We get some, and we get some good coverage, but it's not the level that the radio talk shows aren't talking about how did Lee basketball do last night. So anything we can do to get our brand out there is better.
And speaking of radios, we kind of shift back towards commentary, broadcasting, and just the play-by-play portion of it. Having done commentary, especially as somebody who has been primarily a play-by-play announcer at Lee, you've been doing more color analyst stuff because obviously you have somebody like George Starr who has been
Mhm.
there and has been a staple at Lee. So essentially, from a color analyst standpoint, do you watch games differently when you're an analyst versus if you were watching a game as an average fan?
I think I'd watch games differently just in general, if I'm doing play-by-play for a soccer game or little color for basketball right now. Just I watch because I'm not a coach, I'm not an expert by any means of but I can see what happens, and I can tell you, oh, I see there was a missed pass over there. So I watch to hear what the other commentators are saying in our league or across Division II or Division I, and let's figure out, oh, here's who this person is and here's what happened. And I just kind of keep it in my mind of, oh, so when we play, let's say we play Union, I know who this person is and what they tend to do just by watching.
And then life outside of Lee. Talk a little bit about just what family life has become like, because I feel like in the world of sports information, a lot of what we hear within the profession and the realm is it's best if you're by yourself or you're not having to worry about other family responsibilities.
Mhm.
But talk to us a little bit now in this stage of your life, having, you're starting a family, you have your own child. How do you work that kind of balance with work as well as making sure you're also being responsible for family life as well?
Right. I think we're definitely still trying to figure that one out. But the athletics has been really good about not just my department, but any department. Family stuff comes first in a lot of ways. So like if you need to, step aside in an afternoon to handle something with a family or just be with a family because Saturday is gonna be a long, 6, 7 hour day. Take some time off in the afternoon on a Wednesday or a Thursday and go home early just to spend some time. And I think Lee's been great about that. But it's been a little different as well because my wife Allison loves to come to games, and she can't always come to games right now because our daughter is, only 6 months old and can't make every little thing that Allison would like to. So it's been a learning curve for both of us in terms of how this new balance of sports information / going to games looks like. But I talked about earlier at Delta State learning that time balance. I learned a handful of years ago just to take time and just I would go home by myself and just sit on the couch for a while when I was not married. Now it's just a little different. I'm going home when I can and relax and play with the family.
So now, as we kind of package all this together within your journey within athletic communications and being fortunate to be at 3 different Gulf South Conference schools, I know Union was in the
That's weird to say,
process
right?
of being so maybe we could say 2.5 potentially,
Right.
but just being in these multiple GSC schools and environments, what stands out to you about the culture and competitiveness of this conference?
Well, this conference is very competitive. Top to bottom, just every game. You don't know what's going to happen. Like there's upsets in every sport, just about every weekend in some form or fashion. But I also think just everyone knows everybody in this conference for the most part. A new coach comes in, but you learn who they are pretty quickly, and you can have a good relationship with opposing coaches or opposing sports information directors or you name it. You meet an opposing athletic director from another school and can have a relationship with them. It's a rivalry, but also kind of like a close knit community at the same time. You want to beat the other teams, but you also want to have that friendship.
Which could be the same answer to the next question I'm asking, but from specifically the athletic communications realm and the SID standpoint, what would you say makes the GSC unique compared to the other 22 conferences in Division Two?
We try to hold each other to a standard. Sometimes we all make mistakes. We all fail at, forgetting to send a word roster or a stat file. We have to ask for it. We all make those mistakes, but we try to hold each other to a standard and also we like each other for the most part and get along and want to, have everybody be the best they can be. So we're not afraid to, stir the pot a little bit, but also be friends and get along and have a meal together at the same time. Like if I go on the road, I want to, hang out and talk with the host SID for a little bit, catch up with what their family's doing or what their life is going like.
Philip, before we let you get going, we do have a couple of rapid fire questions we
Oh
want
boy.
to we want to ask you. What's the loudest gym or stadium you've ever worked in?
I think Valdosta's complex is really loud. When it's full, I've been there for a couple of playoff games, NCAA tournament games. When it's full, that place is rocking.
What's your favorite type of story to tell? A human interest story, a hype content, or a game recap?
What format are we talking about, or just in general?
We'll say as like an article to write.
I might say game recap to write. Um, I'm a good writer. It's not my speciality, but I'll say give me a good game recap where a lot happens, and I like to tell that story.
Most quotable coach or athlete you've ever interviewed?
Interviewed, ooh, Coach Todd Cooley at Delta State has had some good quotes throughout my time at Delta State.
Fair enough. What's the one software tool you couldn't live without in your role?
Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop, by far. Just enough. You need graphics, design, edit a photo. It's got to be Photoshop.
Your personal nightmare, a wrong graphic or a wrong pronunciation?
Oh, wrong graphic. I can correct because I can go back and correct myself. I'm like, sorry, I missaid that. But you post, and I've done it many times. You post a wrong graphic on a final score, and people comment on it. To me, that's more embarrassing than because if I mess up a name, no one is telling me immediately. I mess, no, the crowd around me is not telling me, oh, you messed that up. But if you put out a wrong score graphic or a wrong graphic, people are commenting. That's more embarrassing.
If there was a movie that was based off of your story in life, which actor would play you in a movie about your media career?
Ooh, Oh man, I have never thought about this in my whole life. What actor? Who is I'm like, who's the actor that played Shang-Chi in Marvels? That I can't remember off the top of my head who that was, but I'm terrible with actors' names, but that's who it is. I like the way he handled himself in that movie, as just like at the beginning of the movie, he's like the valet parker, and then takes on this responsibility. That's who I think.
I was gonna
Oh,
say, like as you mentioned
Simu
that,
Liu. Simu Liu. That's his name.
and then if you weren't in athletics, what field would you be working in?
Probably still something with broadcast related, like TV news, or work at a radio station, or some sort of broadcast outlet. I don't know, like, maybe not TV traditional, but some sort of YouTube video podcast channel. Because I love technology as well, and so that just kind of fits my wheelhouse. Whether it's I could be the guy setting up for a broadcast, or I could be someone on air. All that I just love. So it would be something with technology for sure.
Philip, we want to thank you again for taking some time to be with us. We've enjoyed having you on. We're looking forward to some good stuff from Lee. And of course, since we got you during the winter time, it seems like this is sort of the calm before the storm.
Yeah.
But, as you and I both know, when it comes to athletic communications and broadcasting, there really is no such thing as a true break. So we know that you got a whole bunch of things going on, especially with basketball season and even thinking about the spring sports. You got a lot on your hands. But again, thank you for taking some time to be with us, and good luck the rest of the year.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Inside the GSC. Don't forget to hit like, share, or subscribe wherever content can be found so you won't miss highlights, stories, and more. So long for now, and we'll see you back here next time on Inside the GSC.